My name's Marcus, I'm 27, and last month I graduated from law school. I didn't come from a line of lawyers or anything like that. In fact, I'm the first person in my entire family to even finish college. My mom used to say I was the responsible one, but lately I'm not sure she meant it as a compliment. I've always been the quiet type, the one who pays bills on time, stays late at work, and keeps a folder of receipts in alphabetical order. The one who showed up for everyone else. Birthdays, funerals, babysitting emergencies, and especially the stuff no one else wanted to deal with. For years, I poured into them. They were all I had. So when I got accepted into a top 15 law school with a partial scholarship, I thought things would change. Not because I needed praise, but because I figured they'd finally see me. I spent 3 grueling years juggling classes, internships, student loan stress, and a night shift at a campus security desk just to keep the lights on. And through it all, I kept this mental picture of the finish line, standing on stage in my cap and gown, scanning the crowd, and seeing my family smiling back, maybe even a tear or two. 2 months before graduation, I emailed everyone. My mom, my stepdad Gary, my uncle Lou, and my younger cousin Jenna. I booked 4 flights back home to California, rented a suite for the weekend, and reserved 4 prime seats for the graduation ceremony. Front row. The kind of spots that you have to know someone to even ask about. I paid for everything, $9,000 all in. I told myself it was worth it. It's your once-in-a-lifetime moment, I said. Of course they'll come. They all said they were excited. My mom even texted me. Proud of you, baby. Can't wait. And for a while, I let myself believe it. I ordered custom programs with their names printed inside, hired a photographer for family portraits after the ceremony, and even got a plaque engraved. To Marcus. Our rock, our future. I planned to surprise them with it at dinner that night. The first crack appeared 3 days before graduation. I was in the middle of drafting my valedictory remarks. Yeah, I was chosen to speak when I got a text from Jenna. It just said, "Hey, can't come. Finals week. Sorry." No emoji. No call. Just that. I blinked at it for a solid minute, wondering if maybe she was kidding. But nothing else came. The next day, Uncle Lou dropped out. Said he had a conflict with his golf club's quarterly tournament. His exact words? "Can't skip this one, kid. We're finally going to take the trophy this year." As if my graduation was a pickup game. I felt a sharp flick of anger, but kept it buried. I still had my mom and stepdad, right? I kept checking their flight status obsessively, refreshing the page like it would somehow change what I saw. Flight canceled, no rebooking. I called. No answer. I called again. Nothing. Finally, the night before the ceremony, I got a group text. My mom wrote, "Hey honey, we're not going to make it. Gary's not feeling well, and honestly, sitting through all that just sounds like a nightmare. But we're super proud of you. Enjoy the big day." Followed by 2 clapping emojis. My chest went cold. And then Lou chimed in. "Call us when you actually win something, counselor." I stared at my phone like it had physically slapped me. I'd spent thousands for people who couldn't even pretend to care. All the old feelings I thought I'd grown out of came crashing back. The ignored birthdays, the missed school plays, the times I got, "maybe next time," as an answer to anything that mattered to me. I sat there for a long time in my tiny studio apartment, surrounded by unopened caps, robes, and name cards, trying not to spiral. The next morning, I walked to the auditorium with my diploma folder tucked under my arm. I wasn't smiling. I wasn't angry either. Just hollow. I gave the speech. I shook the dean's hand. I stood for the photos. But when I looked out at the sea of proud families, I saw those 4 empty seats right up front. Reserved. Untouched. That's when I knew what I had to do. After the ceremony, I walked back down the aisle alone. The ushers were starting to clean up. I asked one of them if I could borrow a few minutes. He nodded. I sat down in the first row, right in the seat with my mom's name on it, pulled the diploma from its folder, and draped it across all 4 chairs. Then I took out my phone and snapped a photo. No smile. No caption. Just the truth. An hour later, I texted it to the group chat. The message was simple. "This is what you missed." That image must have hit harder than I expected because my mom called about 3 hours later. I let it ring. Then again. And again. The 6th time, I finally answered. She was crying, full-on sobbing, asking why I was being so cold. She said they didn't think it would hurt me this much, and that I was making a scene. That phrase lit something inside me. Making a scene? They ditched the biggest moment of my life. And now I was the one being dramatic? She said Gary was too tired to travel, that Jenna had exams, that Lou was joking when he said I should win something first. Then she said something that made my stomach flip. You'll have other big moments, Marcus. We'll be there for the next one, okay? I looked around at the tiny celebration happening in my apartment. One balloon, a cold pizza, and a single cupcake. And I said, there won't be a next one. Not with you. She went quiet. And then, without telling her what it was, I mentioned the paperwork I had signed that morning. The change I'd made. Something legal. Something permanent. I didn't explain further, not yet. But it was done. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. For a woman who'd always had something to say, whether it was unsolicited advice or backhanded praise, my mom suddenly didn't know how to fill the space. When she finally spoke, her voice was smaller. Marcus, what did you do? I didn't answer. I just told her I had a lot to think about and ended the call. Because what I'd signed that morning wasn't some empty gesture or emotional threat. It was a real legal document, one I'd had drafted, notarized, and filed. See, during my third year of law school, I'd worked part-time for a firm that specialized in estate planning and family law. One of the first things I learned? You don't need to be old to write a will, just smart. And maybe a little burned. I'd built a modest portfolio over the years. A few long-term investments, a retirement account, some startup equity from a summer internship that paid in shares instead of salary. Nothing flashy, but enough that if something happened to me, it could help someone start over. And up until a few days ago, that someone was my family. I'd named my mom as primary beneficiary on everything. Gary as backup. Jenna and Uncle Lou in the mix for small things, a savings account here, a car there. But after what they did, that changed. The morning of graduation, I visited my old firm. Sat across from my mentor, an older attorney named Craig who'd taken me under his wing since 2L year. He didn't ask a lot of questions, just nodded when I explained what I wanted. We updated everything, removed every family member by name. I even added a clause. In the event any of the above-named individuals contests this will or any related documents, they are to be disqualified from any inheritance or claim to the estate. Craig smiled when I asked for that part. You're learning fast, he said. And then I named someone else entirely as my new beneficiary, someone who had shown up. Someone who wasn't family by blood, but had treated me like a brother for years. My roommate, Trey. Trey had been my ride or die since 1L. He's the reason I didn't burn out. The one who stayed up quizzing me for torts finals, who shared every microwave dinner and late-night ramen when I couldn't afford groceries. When I twisted my ankle 2 months before finals, it was Trey who carried my laptop and helped me limp into class. He'd even ironed my gown the night before graduation while blasting 2000s R&B and pretending we were backstage at the Grammys. He didn't know about the paperwork yet. I hadn't told him, but I felt at peace knowing that if anything ever happened to me, the things I'd worked for wouldn't go to the people who only remembered I existed when they wanted something. The fallout from that one photo was slow at first. My cousin Jenna didn't respond at all. She just ghosted the group chat like nothing had happened. Lou replied with a single-word text, drama. No surprise there. But my mom? She spiraled. Over the next 48 hours, I got more messages than I had in the entire past year combined. First, the guilt-tripping texts. We've always supported you in our own way. You don't understand how stressful things have been lately. Can't you just be proud of what you've done without making us the villains? Then came the veiled threats. You don't want to throw away your family over one event. Gary says we should talk before you make anything permanent. Don't do anything stupid out of anger. Blood is blood. That one made me laugh. Because they never seemed to remember blood is blood when I was the one asking for something. When I needed help moving apartments between semesters. Too busy. When I sent Christmas cards every year. No replies. When I graduated undergrad summa cum laude. No one showed. But the second I drew a boundary, suddenly we were family again. And then, the real kicker came 3 days after graduation. My mom sent me a photo, one of the ones I'd had printed for the post-ceremony dinner. In it, she was sitting with me on the stage, smiling like she'd been there all along. Only she hadn't. She photoshopped herself in. She actually had someone edit her into my graduation photo. I stared at it, jaw slack. The lighting was wrong. Her proportions were off. And worst of all, she had the nerve to post it on Facebook with the caption, "Proud of my baby boy, future Supreme Court Justice." Complete with likes, comments from her friends, and people congratulating her. I almost threw my phone. I didn't comment. I didn't even report it. I just took a screenshot, saved it in a folder labeled Delusions, and moved on. At that point, it wasn't just disappointment anymore. It was clarity. I realized I'd spent so long hoping they'd become the family I wished I had, that I never accepted the family I actually had. And that meant the only thing left to do now was let go. I started with the joint account, the one I'd opened years ago when my mom hit a rough patch and I helped cover rent and groceries. I'd forgotten it even existed until I saw a transaction from that morning. $43.79 at some gas station. She was still using it. So I closed it, froze the card, redirected the funds to my personal account. No warning, just done. I drafted an email next. Calm, professional, but final. I stated that moving forward, I'd be focusing on building a life with people who respected me and that any further communication regarding money, holidays, or family emergencies should be directed elsewhere. I CC'd them all. No one replied. But the next day, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived. Handwritten. From Gary. He said he didn't agree with how my mom handled things, that he tried to convince her to go to the graduation, but she refused to budge. He said watching the fallout had been a wake-up call. He even apologized for not doing more to defend me over the years. At the bottom, he left his number and said he'd respect my decision, no matter what it was. And for the first time in this entire ordeal, I didn't know how to feel, because part of me wanted to tear the letter up. But another part wondered if maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone as I thought. Still, the damage was done. And that legal change I made, that was just the first step, because what came next was bigger than any of them could have imagined. I sat with Gary's letter for a full day before I even considered replying. The handwriting was shaky but deliberate, the words almost too carefully chosen. Not flowery, but cautious, like someone trying to balance guilt with self-preservation. I reread the part where he said he didn't agree with my mom, and I'll admit, it hit differently than I expected. Growing up, Gary was never outright cruel. He was more of a background figure, always in the room, rarely in the conversation. When I was 12 and my bike got stolen, it was Gary who silently drove me to the pawn shops to look for it. When my laptop died during my first semester of law school, it was Gary who quietly mailed me a refurbished one with no note, just a sticker that said, "Keep going." But he also never stood up to my mom when she dismissed me, when she made little digs about how I was too sensitive or trying too hard to be special. So yeah, part of me wondered if the letter was real, or if it was his way of staying in my good graces now that I had something they could brag about. But I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I focused on something else, the second copy of the diploma. I'd ordered two, one to keep framed in my apartment and another to bring home for a special gift. Originally, I'd planned to give it to my mom, to surprise her with it at the celebration dinner. It had come in this beautiful leather-bound case with a gold clasp. Very official, but now, looking at it just made my stomach twist. I took it out and stared at it for a long time. The name, Marcus Elijah Cole, glinted in embossed lettering. Below that, Juris Doctor, magna cum laude. And above it, the university's crest, shining like something out of a dream. This was supposed to be the centerpiece of a proud family moment. Instead, it sat in my hands like a piece of evidence. Proof that I'd achieved something no one in my family cared enough to show up for. That's when the idea hit me. I'd already sent them the photo of the diploma draped across their empty seats. That was step one. But now, I wanted to make sure the second copy of this diploma meant something too. So I drove back to the law firm. Craig wasn't in that day, but his assistant, Danny, was. She'd seen me around the office enough to smile and wave without needing much context. I told her I needed a new notary stamp, and she handed me a fresh one with a wink. Another scorched earth letter? She joked. Something like that, I said. I went home and sat at my desk for hours, writing. What started as a short letter turned into something much longer. I poured out every thought I'd never said aloud. Every moment I remembered as a kid feeling like the family afterthought. Every holiday where I watched my siblings open gifts while I got socks. Every call that went unanswered. Every "will come next time." That never came. But I didn't stop there. I wrote about law school. About what it felt like to be surrounded by brilliant people and still feel like I didn't belong. About eating stale granola bars for dinner and washing laundry at 2 a.m. so I could make my 8 a.m. classes. About the sheer terror of thinking I might fail, not for myself, but because if I did, no one would care enough to catch me. I ended it with this. You told me to call when I won something. Well, here it is. But I didn't win because of you. I won in spite of you. And from now on, I'm not working this hard for a seat at your table. I'm building my own. I signed it. I printed it. I slid it inside the diploma case. Then I wrapped the whole thing in brown paper and shipped it, priority, signature required, to my mother's address. The next day, I blocked her number. No drama. No yelling. Just silence. It was surprisingly peaceful. That weekend, I went to dinner with Trey and some of our law school friends. We toasted with cheap champagne, laughed about bar prep stress, and argued over which Supreme Court justice had the worst haircut. And for once, I didn't feel like I was performing. I didn't feel like I was trying to prove anything to anyone. I was just me. A week passed, then another. And then, out of nowhere, I got a text from Jenna. "What did you send, Grandma?" I blinked. Grandma? I hadn't even considered that the package might be opened in a family setting. My mom must have brought it over to show off, maybe thinking it was some fancy recognition or award. But instead, she'd unwrapped my words. No filters. No sugarcoating. I didn't reply to Jenna. I didn't know her an explanation. But I did go check my email and saw something that made my heart stop. There, in my inbox, was a new message. Subject: request to schedule mediation, family estate dispute. From a name I didn't recognize. A lawyer, representing Lou. Apparently, he didn't take too kindly to being removed from my estate plan. You'd think someone like Uncle Lou would just take the hint and move on. But Lou wasn't the type to let go of anything, especially not money. He'd once sued his ex-wife over a ceramic garden gnome collection and spent $4,000 trying to prove a point. So when I removed him from my will, I should have known he'd treat it like a personal attack. But here's the thing Lou didn't understand. I wanted him to react. That's why I left just enough breadcrumbs. I wanted someone to test me, to see if I meant business. And out of all of them, Lou was always the loudest, the most entitled, and the least capable of recognizing when he was out of his depth. The mediation request came through a week after the package with my letter and diploma landed in my mom's hands. According to the email, Lou had seen the letter, assumed it applied retroactively to assets he thought he was still entitled to, and decided he'd been unjustly disinherited. He didn't realize, or maybe didn't care, that I was still very much alive. That's not how wills work, obviously. You can't contest a living person's estate plan unless you're alleging fraud, coercion, or mental incompetence. Lou's lawyer tried to argue all three. It was insulting, honestly, that I'd somehow been coerced into removing Lou from my financial planning. By whom? Myself? The first mediation session was virtual. Lou showed up wearing a golf polo and Bluetooth headset, looking smug and clueless. His lawyer, a guy who looked like he'd been pulled off a Craigslist ad, opened with a speech about deep emotional harm and verbal contracts within families. I just sat there, hands folded, letting my new attorney, yes, I had one now, dismantle their argument like it was a case study in how not to sue. Lou's lawyer tried to bring up past financial gifts I'd given, like the time I helped pay for Jenna's tutoring or when I covered a few months of utilities for Mom. He argued that these created a reasonable expectation of future support. My attorney calmly pointed out that family generosity does not equal a binding contract. It was over in 15 minutes. The mediator turned to Lou and said, "Sir, unless your nephew is deceased or declared legally incapacitated, you have no standing here." Lou looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. "So what? He can just cut us off." "Yes," the mediator said flatly. And that was it. After the meeting ended, my lawyer turned to me with a grin. "Well, that was fun. Want to make it official?" I nodded. We moved ahead with finalizing a revocable trust. I consolidated all of my assets, investments, savings, even future intellectual property rights from a casebook I was helping publish, into a protected trust with clearly stated terms. And just for good measure, I added a no-contest clause with teeth. If anyone named in the trust attempted to challenge it, they'd forfeit their share. Gary was the only family member I left in, not because I fully trusted him yet, but because of that letter. Because unlike the rest, he'd shown a flicker of remorse. That mattered. The rest of the summer passed quietly. I started studying for the bar, spending long hours at the library with Trey, downing espresso shots and highlighting everything in sight. Occasionally, I'd get updates, secondhand messages from extended family trying to check in. I didn't respond. Then one day, Trey knocked on my bedroom door with a weird look on his face. "You should see this," he said, handing me his phone. It was a Facebook post from my mom. People think success means money or titles. But real success is knowing who stood by you when it mattered. We raised a lawyer. We're proud. But we don't support entitlement, even from family. She had the audacity to paint herself as the victim. Comments flooded in, friends offering hugs, support, some even taking her side. One said, "Your son sounds ungrateful. Stay strong, Queen." Queen. I didn't respond publicly. I didn't take the bait. Instead, I printed the post, folded it neatly, and tucked it into a folder labeled Emotional Receipts. Right behind a screenshot of Lou's failed legal threat, and the image of my diploma spread across those empty seats. But the real closure came 2 weeks later, on a random Tuesday morning. I was halfway through my flashcards when the doorbell rang. I opened it and found Gary standing there. No warning, no text, holding a small cardboard box and looking different, tired, nervous, human. He didn't try to come in. He just handed me the box and said, "She wanted me to bring this. Said it belonged to you." I opened it right there. Inside was an old photo album, one I hadn't seen in years. It had pictures of me as a kid, all the usual milestones. First day of school, Halloween costumes, me in a cheap suit at my high school debate tournament. And tucked into the front cover was a short letter. Handwritten. From her. The handwriting was messy this time. Angry even. "I don't know what you want from me. I'm sorry I didn't come. But I've given you everything I had. I wasn't perfect. But I don't deserve this level of punishment. You embarrassed me. You made your point. Now come home." I closed the letter. Gary watched me for a moment and asked, "Is there any way back from this, Marcus?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked at the photo album. Then I looked at him and said, "I don't need her to be perfect. I needed her to care." He nodded. "She won't say it, but she regrets it. She watches your speech on YouTube every night." That part surprised me. I hadn't even posted it. Apparently, the university had. It had gotten a few thousand views. The comments were kind. Some even said it made them cry. I thought about what Gary said. Then I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, and sat down on the porch next to him. We didn't talk about the past. Not directly. But we sat there for a long time. Quiet. Easy. And maybe that was enough. The next day, I mailed the photo album back. No note, no message. Just the album. That was my final answer. When the bar results came in, I passed. Top 10%. Trey popped a bottle of champagne, and I let myself feel it. The win. The real one. Not for them. For me. I accepted an offer at a mid-sized firm in Chicago a month later. Good salary. Great mentorship. Real potential. Before I left, I packed up my apartment, boxed up every memory from law school, and left a framed copy of my diploma in Trey's room, with a post-it on it. For the real ones who showed up. I haven't spoken to my mother since. She still sends holiday texts. She even tried to Venmo me once, $20, with a caption that said, "For coffee. Don't be a stranger." I declined the payment. And I still have the original photo. The diploma draped over 4 empty chairs. Sometimes I look at it, not out of bitterness, but as a reminder that sometimes the family you choose matters more than the one you're born into. And sometimes revenge isn't loud. It's quiet. It's living well. It's being okay without them. And I am. I really am. Let me know your thoughts in the comments.